This anime begins when all of humanity in a city called Inside City has the desire to be able to live forever or have a longer life. To realize that dream, the government formed a technology research and development organization called SHIELD. The SHIELD organization was formed to carry out various research on technology that can allow humans to have eternal life. And now, some of the humans in Inside City have lived longer than previous generations. A few years after the SHIELD organization was formed, they succeeded in developing a technology implant that can extend human life to 120 years. For this success, the leadership of Inside City also held a big celebration that will take place at the Tokyo Olympic Stadium in a few months. But behind the success of SHIELD technology, there is a terrible secret that is not known by many people, and there are several people who have different reactions to the SHIELD technology. Not a few people turned into a monster because their bodies resisted the SHIELD technology injected into their bodies. People who fail and turn into monsters are known as Lost, and they are a new threat to the residents of Inside City. To deal with humans who have turned into Lost, the SHIELD organization will be directly responsible for capturing these monsters. They will deploy several teams to detect the appearance of the Lost and send an execution team to catch the Lost. That night, when Yoshiko and Atsugi, who are officers from the SHIELD organization, were on patrol to catch Lost wandering in the middle of the city, they got an additional task to find the whereabouts of a young man named Horiki Masao. The SHIELD organization guessed that the young man was the only person who managed to get out of the SHIELD system, and that made it even more difficult for the SHIELD troops to track down Masao's whereabouts. Atsugi is the leader of the execution squad of the SHIELD organization, and Yoshiko Hiragi is a system operator who works under direct orders from the leader of the SHIELD organization named Shibuda. That night, after the SHIELD troops captured the humans who had turned into Lost and immobilized them with a special chemical injection, Yoshiko took the Lost to the SHIELD headquarters for further investigation. Meanwhile, the outcasts living in Outside City seem to dislike the existence of the SHIELD system, but the reason behind it is still unknown. Not long after, a young man named Takeuchi and Masao came to a bar run by a woman nicknamed Madam. Takeuchi intends to visit his best friend named Oba Yozo because lately, Yozo has been isolating himself more often in his room. Yozo himself is a young artist who spends most of his time painting various aesthetic paintings that have high artistic value. Unfortunately, even though he has a brilliant talent in the field of art, Yozo still cannot change his fate and is not happy with the life he currently has. This was because Yozo was a resident of Outside City, and he didn't have much opportunity to develop his potential in that place. Even he often tried to end his own life repeatedly, but those attempts always failed because the SHIELD system chip embedded in Yozo's body could heal every wound in his body automatically. That night, Takeuchi and Masao invited Yozo to join the operation to attack the SHIELD organization's headquarters in Inside City. Although initially Yozo was reluctant to join in the attack, he finally agreed and joined the gathering at Takeuchi's headquarters in an abandoned workshop. Takeuchi told his entire biker gang that they were going to attack the headquarters of the SHIELD research organization in the center of Inside City. He deliberately did all that because he thought that the government had alienated the people who were in Outside City since the SHIELD system was implemented. Therefore, he and his team intend to destroy the SHIELD base and all research. Takeuchi also informed Yozo and the rest of the motorcycle gang that the attack plan was initiated by Masao. Before the attack operation was carried out, Masao had given a strange pill to Yozo and Takeuchi without telling them the use of the pill. That night, after all the equipment and vehicles had been prepared, Takeuchi and his group started moving towards the center of the city where the headquarters of the SHIELD organization was located. Takeuchi and his motorcycle gang had gone ahead, while Yozo was still lagging behind because his motorcycle didn't go that fast. As for Masao, he still followed them from behind using his car while continuing to keep his distance, so he wouldn't be seen by the range of supervisors from the SHIELD organization. At the same time, Yoshiko and the other SHIELD officers had detected the presence of Takeuchi and his gang who had arrived in the city center, so they immediately mobilized many robots to block them. They also took strict action against the motorcycle gang who resisted by firing tasers at them. While Yoshiko was monitoring the situation, she noticed that there was something odd about the bodies of Takeuchi and several others. Shibuda, who knew about it, immediately ordered Atsugi to get rid of them because Shibuda realized that the group had the potential to turn into Lost. Shibuda's suspicions turned out to be true. Takeuchi showed the usual early symptoms, and slowly, Takeuchi began to turn into Lost. At the same time, Yoshiko detects Masao's presence in the motorcycle gang convoy, and she realizes that Masao is behind the attack operation. Yoshiko believes that most likely, Masao is the one who caused Takeuchi to turn into Lost, and he plans to create a mass appearance of Lost. Yoshiko finds out that Masao did all that on purpose to find someone who can become an applicant just like him and Yoshiko. He wanted to find someone who could evolve into an applicant who was the perfect form of the SHIELD system program. On the other hand, Shibuda realized that an applicant like Masao and Yoshiko could be useful for perfecting the SHIELD system. But Shibuda is afraid that the applicant will side with Masao and instead help him to control Inside City, so Shibuda prefers to kill all Lost even though they could potentially become an applicant. Therefore, Shibuda ordered Yoshiko and Atsugi to kill the Losts that appeared that night, including Takeuchi, who had slowly turned into Lost. Back to the SHIELD officers, who managed to stop several members of the motorcycle gang using their security robots. Even though the SHIELD officers had defeated the other members of Takeuchi's motorcycle gang, they failed to prevent Takeuchi, who had already broken through the first gate of the SHIELD headquarters using his bomb-laden car. After successfully passing through the first gate, he still continued to drive his motorbike at high speed to break through the second gate, which was currently heavily guarded by security officers. Surprisingly, Takeuchi, who had lost his consciousness, chose to crash himself into the officer's car, causing a huge explosion. When Yozo saw the explosion, he immediately rushed over to Takeuchi to check on his condition, and at the same time, an execution team was dispatched to arrest them both. Unfortunately, Takeuchi has turned into a Lost and begins to lose his consciousness as a human and act aggressively. Takeuchi had lost control and immediately attacked everyone near him, including Yozo, who was his own best friend. In the midst of the chaos, Yozo, who had been seriously injured by Takeuchi's attack, also began to turn into a Lost due to the drug that had previously been given by Masao. This condition forced Atsugi and his remaining SHIELD troops to immediately ambush and kill them both. While Yoshiko was doing a scan of Yozo's body, Yoshiko sensed that Yozo had a different reaction from Lost in general. Shortly after that, Yozo's body suddenly turned into a more ferocious monster and immediately attacked Takeuchi brutally until he died. After that incident, Atsugi and the other officers immediately moved quickly to arrest and kill Yozo. But before they could catch him, Yoshiko suddenly asked Atsugi's team to hold off their attack. This was because Yoshiko could hear Yozo's thoughts and realized that Yozo was the third applicant just like herself and Masao. She then tried to calm Yozo using her applicant's power, and this method succeeded in making him turn back to being an ordinary human. Meanwhile, Masao, who witnessed the rise of the third applicant from a distance, was also very satisfied because all the hard work he had done so far had paid off. The next day, exactly 3 months before the celebration day was held, Shibuda went to see the elders to report about Yozo's appearance as the third applicant. The elders later revealed that at this time, they still didn't know who Yozo would side with, so they had to be careful. But based on Shibuda's observations so far, Yozo is likely to side with the SHIELD organization, which will help create a better human civilization. With Yozo's appearance as the third applicant, the elders believe that Yozo will perfect the SHIELD system and help increase the average lifespan of humans at that time. A few days later, when Yozo had regained consciousness, he found himself in the research room of SHIELD headquarters with Yoshiko. Yoshiko then introduced herself to him and explained that Yozo was the third applicant they had been waiting for. After that, Yoshiko took him to another room while explaining that the cause of Takeuchi and the others turning into Lost was the result of the system engineering pill created by Masao. Hearing this, Yozo suddenly remembered the pills that Masao had given before the attack operation. Furthermore, Yoshiko said that Masao plans to destroy the SHIELD system that has been helping humanity a lot in Inside City. Therefore, she asked Yozo to join the SHIELD organization in order to fight Masao and stop his evil plans. After realizing that Masao was the cause of Takeuchi's death, Yozo immediately accepted the offer so that he could take revenge for Takeuchi's death. But before that, Yozo asked Yoshiko for permission to allow him to return to his inn in Outside City for some time. At first, Yoshiko objected to the request because she was afraid that Masao would affect Yozo's mind and turn against them. But after Shibuda allowed it, Yozo was finally allowed to return to his inn with an escort from Atsugi and the other SHIELD troops. The next day, Yoshiko escorted Yozo to Outside City with Atsugi's troops, who escorted them both from behind. After they arrived at the inn, Yozo was immediately greeted by Madame and her daughter because they thought Yozo had been killed in the raid operation the other day. After Yozo entered his room, Yoshiko started to introduce herself to Madame and asked her a few things about Yozo. Based on Madame's confession, Yozo has been abandoned by his parents since he was young, and the only person who is closest to Yozo is Takeuchi. While Yoshiko was busy conversing with Madame, Yozo secretly went to Takeuchi's headquarters in the motorcycle repair shop to pay his last respects to him. After Yoshiko realized that Yozo had left his room, she immediately tracked the whereabouts of Yozo's body signal with her applicant's power. She then reported the incident to Atsugi so they could immediately pick up Yozo. At the same time, Masao suddenly appears at Takeuchi's headquarters and pretends to pay his last respects to Takeuchi. He then takes Yozo to a secret lab where he develops plants that can be used as medicine to turn someone into Lost. Masao said that in the past, he was a researcher who took part in the process of developing the SHIELD system. But over time, Masao began to think that the SHIELD was a barrier from the occurrence of Lost, the true form of humans. Therefore, he wants to destroy the SHIELD system that is currently being developed and turn humans into Lost troops so that he can build a better world for everyone. But Yozo couldn't believe Masao's words anymore. Yozo felt very angry with Masao for causing Takeuchi's death. Hearing that, Masao immediately showed a picture of the future to Yozo where at that time, everyone had died due to the failure of the shield system. Masao tried to convince Yozo that the chaos Yozo saw at that time could happen in the future if they didn't destroy the shield system as soon as possible. After hearing all these explanations, Masao was even more confused and became doubtful about which side he should trust. Yozo suddenly remembered that Masao once gave the flower plant that Masao used to make the lost-inducing medicine to Madame. Yozo immediately ran to the inn to warn Madame and her daughter about the flower. Unfortunately, when Yozo arrived at Madame's inn, Madame's daughter had already turned into a lost who then attacked Madame until she died. The incident almost made Yozo lose control and turn into the form of an applicant. But before that happened, Yoshiko immediately tried to calm him. While crying, Yozo told about what Masao had shown him where everyone would die in the future due to the failure of the shield system. Yoshiko immediately denied this and said that what Masao said was just a lie. Yoshiko then took Yozo to a place to show him the true picture of the future. But before showing the picture, she wanted to talk about the incident she had experienced in the past. Several years ago, Yoshiko's father suddenly lost control and almost killed Yoshiko, but she managed to survive because Yoshiko's father chose to end his own life after some of her father's consciousness returned. Unexpectedly, the story made Yozo reminisce about past memories that had actually been forgotten by him. It turns out that Yozo also experienced the same thing. In the past, both of Yozo's parents died because Yozo's father suddenly turned into a lost, and it was Yozo who killed his own father. After remembering the incident, Yozo became more and more panicked and kept blaming himself for what had happened to his father. Yoshiko immediately hugged Yozo to calm him and said that their lives must go on, even though past events have hurt them a lot. Yoshiko then showed a picture of the future if they succeeded in developing and perfecting the shield system. The world looks very peaceful and everyone can live their life very comfortably. Shortly after, Masao suddenly appears with two losts and begins to instigate Yozo to side with him. However, because he refused, Masao immediately used his applicant power to control Yozo's mind so that Yozo was unable to attack Masao. Masao even forced Yozo to take out his own heart so that he died, and the shield organization's dream to use Yozo's power also vanished. Not only that, Masao was also trying to control Yozo's mind so that Yozo would attack and kill Yoshiko. At the same time, Atsugi, who had just arrived, immediately attacked Masao and tried to stop him. Unfortunately, Masao had already managed to escape from that place with Yozo's heart. Meanwhile, when Yozo was about to hurt Yoshiko, Yozo tried hard to fight back from Masao's influence, and finally, Yoshiko managed to restore Yozo's consciousness. On the other hand, Masao, who has managed to get Yozo's heart, begins to experiment with a lost named Shizuko. Masao says that his plan to destroy the shield system is about to start because he has got Yozo's heart. After the incident, Yoshiko and the team from the shield organization tried to save Yozo by installing an artificial heart in Yozo's body. However, until now, there has been no development indicating that Yozo will return to life. In addition to monitoring Yozo's progress, Yoshiko and Atsugi also have to get ready to face the threat of attack from Masao on the day of the celebration of the success of the shield system, which will be held tomorrow. Atsugi promises that he will do his best to stop Masao, even if he has to risk his life. On the other hand, Shibuda went back to the Elder to discuss the alternative plan they had previously planned. Although it is not known exactly what alternative plan they mean, Shibuda seems to reject the plan. However, he couldn't refuse the orders from the Elders, so he had no other choice but to obey the requests from the Elders. The day before the celebration of the shield system, Yoshiko was desperate to enter Yozo's subconscious mind with her applicant power, even though it was very risky and could make Yoshiko's soul trapped in Yozo's mind. But before Yoshiko slipped further into Yozo's mind, Shibuda immediately asked her to cancel the process because Shibuda would carry out the alternative plan. The alternative plan that he was referring to was the process of transferring body extracts and the shield system from Yozo's body to the bodies of the higher-ups or the Elders, so that higher-ups could live longer lives than other humans. Yoshiko also felt excruciating pain in her heart after learning of the plan and was eager to oppose it. Unfortunately, she couldn't do much because it was an order from the higher-ups. Fortunately, not long after that, Yoshiko managed to wake Yozo from his long slumber. Yozo, who at that time saw Yoshiko in his subconscious, began to feel surprised because she actually looked very sad before she finally said that that moment was their last meeting. After that, Yoshiko asked Yozo to paint her in Yozo's mind so that he could always see her in his heart. Even though Yozo still didn't understand the meaning of Yoshiko's words, he still obeyed her request. After Yozo finished his painting, Yoshiko immediately said goodbye to Yozo and came out of Yozo's mind. Several hours later, Yozo finally woke up from his coma and immediately rushed to ask Atsugi about Yoshiko's whereabouts. Atsugi couldn't give any answer either because he didn't know her whereabouts until now. Meanwhile, all the residents of Inside City have gathered at the Tokyo Stadium to celebrate the success of the shield system that has extended their lifespan. Masao and his men were also present at the celebration, but it is still unknown what Masao will plan for the event. Atsugi then went to see Shibuda to inquire about Yoshiko's whereabouts, but the answer Shibuda gave really took him by surprise. It turns out that Yoshiko has volunteered to replace Yozo in the shield system transplant plan for the higher-ups. Atsugi couldn't contain his anger after he heard that and immediately hit Shibuda so that he would realize his mistake. Atsugi couldn't believe that Shibuda would sacrifice Yoshiko to fulfill the greed of the higher-ups who wanted to live forever. On the other hand, Masao starts to enter Yozo's mind and says that all this mess happened because Yozo doesn't want to side with him. Masao said all that after he managed to create a mass lost phenomenon in the middle of the city and create terror in various places. After Masao left Yozo's mind, Atsugi then invited Yozo to immediately go to a secret operation room. When Yozo saw Yoshiko's lifeless body, Yozo couldn't help but froze as if he was powerless to do anything else. He was devastated after learning that Yoshiko had sacrificed herself to protect him. Meanwhile, Masao is still creating hundreds of lost monsters and controlling them all so that he can destroy the entire city. The shield officers deployed by Atsugi were still not strong enough to defeat Masao. Atsugi then invites Yozo to fight against Masao together so that all the sacrifices made by Yoshiko do not end in vain. Hearing this, Yozo immediately remembered how much trust Yoshiko had in the success of the shield system that could create world peace. Yozo began to activate the power of the shield that he had, and turned into a more perfect form of an applicant of fire. Yozo then went to the place where the higher-ups were because he knew that Masao was currently targeting the higher-ups. Yozo's assumption proved to be true. Masao had arrived at the location of the higher-ups with his giant lost monster and intended to kill them. At the same time, Yozo arrived at the location and it made the higher-ups look happy because they thought that Yozo would save them from Masao's attack. But actually, Yozo's purpose in coming to them was not only to defeat Masao, but also intended to take revenge for Yoshiko's death. While Yozo was fighting Masao, Yozo secretly controlled the remnants of Yoshiko's shield system in the bodies of the higher-ups so that the system would kill the greedy higher-ups. In the end, the higher-ups died and turned into Lost with Yoshiko's form and consciousness. Unfortunately, when the Lost of Yoshiko's soul wanted to attack Masao, Masao immediately used his applicant power to control Yoshiko to fight back against Yozo and create a huge Lost vortex. As a result, the battle between Yozo and all the Lost monsters from Yoshiko's soul was unavoidable. In that fight, Yozo didn't try to attack Yoshiko at all because he felt that the Lost monsters were still a part of Yoshiko. But after a while, Yozo began to realize that if he died in this battle, then Yoshiko's dreams and hopes would also be destroyed. With all that in mind, he finally got back up and immediately attacked Lost Yoshiko until the entire Lost was destroyed. Unfortunately, Masao attacked Yozo first, causing him to crash hard and fall unconscious. Masao then used the opportunity to create a much larger Lost vortex so he could destroy the entire city. Fortunately, all of Yoshiko's memories which are still engraved in Yozo's heart managed to make Yozo rise with much greater strength and instantly kill Masao. After Masao died, Yozo then used his power in the form of a fire vortex to destroy Masao's Lost vortex. After the big incident ended, Yozo finally decided to join the SHIELD organization fully and devote his life to making Yoshiko's dream come true. The anime ends. The moral that can be learned is that we must try to be grateful for all the things we have in life properly, and don't be greedy for something that we can't bear alone.